All right. Well, hello and welcome to Evolved Network and Application Security Architectures on AWS. Now, today's exciting webinar is sponsored by Fortinet, AWS, and Enterprise Strategy Group and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Jess Steinbach. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I am so excited that I get to be your moderator for this conversation today because securing cloud infrastructure is such an interesting topic, mostly because it changes all the time. As these new technologies emerge, new applications, new threats, it got me thinking. I was considering this morning. It reminded me of that thing we learned when we were in grade school about the universe kind of creating the space that it fills, right? And I started thinking about that with the cloud because it does sort of feel like the cloud is creating the space that it fills. It evolves and then fills. A new need pops up, organizations grow, industries expand. And this whole big universe of cloud is just filling the space that it creates. It's pretty cool to think about, but it is also a very big job, especially when we are the ones in charge of thinking about and planning for security. So today, we are going to take a minute to learn together from some of the leading experts at Fortinet, ESG, and AWS. This rockstar crew is here with us today to help us explore the rapidly evolving world around us, what we can do to overcome some of those top cloud security challenges, what threats we need to be aware of, and how you can avoid them with the right solutions and strategies. This is going to be such a cool conversation. I cannot wait to get started. So let's zip through this housekeeping and get on our way. All right, first, I want to draw your attention on over to the questions section of your webinar console. This is the absolute best place to get involved, get interactive, and post all of your insightful questions, your comments, your feedback, your wonderings about the grandness of the universe. Whatever ideas you have going on today, we want to hear from you. So find that questions tab right now. Let's start out by saying hi, hello, give a little wave to the community out there with us today. Now, as a quick side note, that window is also the best place to reach out and let us know if you have any technical issues during the session today. Knock on wood, of course. But hey, if those little tech gremlins get a hold of you, you are going to try one of two things. First, give it a little browser refresh. Try a browser refresh to start. If that does not work, if that doesn't clear out those little gremlins, you can shoot us a message in the questions tab and the Actual Tech Media crew will be there to help you out. All right, the last thing I want to point out on this tour of your audience console is the handouts tab. Be sure that you check out the resources that are there for you. Some great follow-ups to our conversation today, including the ebook from ESG, Looking to Modernize Network Security on Public Clouds. Well, consider a cloud-native managed firewall service. This is a great read, a great follow-up to the conversation that we're going to have. So make sure you download that, put that aside. Don't read it just yet because you're going to want to stay focused on the info we've got coming your way. Now, if all of that cool content wasn't enough, we also have a prize giveaway for you. We have a $250 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. Now, of course, you must be in live attendance as we go through this session, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you're not sure what those are, you can head on over to the handouts tab that we were just looking at, click in, scroll down to the bottom, and you'll find the T's and C's linked for you there. All right. Well, that is it for the housekeeping. Told you we'd keep it short and sweet, and now we are ready to start our webinar. I am so excited to introduce you all to our three incredible speakers that we have here with us today. Melinda Marks, Practice Director of Cybersecurity at ESG, Brian Mendenhall, Worldwide Head of Security Partners at AWS, and Aiden Walden, Global Director of Cloud DevOps, Engineering and Architecture at Fortinet. What a rockstar crew. This is going to be such a fun conversation. Melinda, I think you're going to kick us off today, so I am going to hand things on over to you. Take it away.
Hi, everybody. We're here to talk about evolved network and application security architectures on AWS. I'm Melinda Marks, Practice Director for Cybersecurity at Enterprise Strategy Group. I'm here with Brian Mendenhall, Worldwide Head of Security Partners from AWS. Hey, Brian.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. And I've got Aiden Walden, Global Director of Cloud DevOps Engineering and Architecture from Fortinet. Hey there, Aiden.
Hey, good to be here. Thank you.
Great to have you guys. So we have a great agenda and discussion planned for today. We're happy to take any questions. You can enter them in the chat box and we'll do our best to answer them at the end of this program. If we run out of time, we'll follow up with you directly, but we hope to get to as many as we can. So without further ado, let's get started. So organizations today are under tremendous pressure to move their applications to the cloud to realize the benefit of cloud agility and improved user experience. Our research shows that organizations are increasingly putting production workloads into public cloud services. So you can see here in this chart, the dark blue are the current percentages of production workloads in the cloud, and the lighter blue is the percentage of production workloads on public cloud infrastructure in 24 months. So the note here is nearly 1 in 7 respondents report that more than 40% of their production workloads run on public cloud infrastructure, and this is expected to double in the next 24 months. So with the cloud, they gain the benefits, including faster time to market, faster time to remediate issues, and with developers, they don't have to wait for IT or ops to provision servers. They just provision their infrastructure, they build their apps, and they can deploy them to the cloud for their applications to be in use by customers, partners, or employees. So it's really a great productivity gain. So here we see some challenges, though, that this brings up for security. The security teams are challenged as they support these efforts, and this migration is really ongoing. So they still have their workloads in their data centers, so they also need to make sure they adjust their strategy so they can support this digital transformation and bring the benefits of the cloud. So this is really what we're here to talk about today. And here, they typically, you could see some of the statements that they've made. They typically have strong network and firewall strategies for their on-prem environments, but they really need to figure out how to adapt as they move to the cloud to ensure consistent security and make sure that they're confident in that they can protect their applications. So the data on their challenges that they face when they adapt their strategies to moving these workloads to the clouds are things like it's hard to gain consistency across cloud environments. Each cloud is architected differently. So how do you get an accurate view or control? How there's a lack of access to physical network and the dynamic nature of the workloads makes it difficult to monitor the environments. And then also here, the differences between cloud native applications and the rest of applications and infrastructure require a different security policy or technology. Brian, is this what you're seeing, and how are you helping customers?
Yeah, no, absolutely. You nailed it. Everything you just said, plus one on that. We're definitely seeing, that the cloud is not just for large enterprise organizations anymore. It's for everybody, right? And I think that some of the economic conditions that we saw in 2023 really accelerated that motion that organizations with that were old school on-prem, I've got my servers in the closet, are realizing the benefits of cloud go down market as well, right? So SMB is moving to the cloud faster than ever. DNB, obviously, and with that comes that shift left that you're talking about, right? It's not just I built this application. I've got this on my computer. I'll submit a ticket and have somebody review this, and then it gets pushed to prod, and like it's moved from this server to that server. Rather, these automated workflows are happening in the cloud at the speed of light, right? And so as such, the security landscape is expanded, not just from these are my firewalls, like here's my DMZ, I'm good to go, but really a more holistic picture of security, and that it is embedded throughout the business, including production, which is tied to your product. And so it is really shifting left. And as it does so, it is moving throughout the business as well. So seeing all of what you're describing, and yes, the cloud adoption acceleration has just been, it has been amazing to behold the last 12 months. And I definitely see where we're going in the next 24 months. Totally agree.
And Aiden, what are you seeing with Fortinet customers, and how are you helping them?
Wow. So there's a lot to unpack in all that you just said. All of it, I think, is accurate. We started with customers more than a decade ago to move to cloud. Yes, it's absolutely accelerating. I think we're seeing industries by whole segments and verticals move, in addition to the size of certain companies. So large enterprises, financial services, they're making a wholesale IT transformation right now. And there's always going to be this iterative process in cloud where there's a lot of digital experimentation, and then they go through a digital maturity cycle of transformation, and they'll continue to iterate. The goal of the security practice or an organization that is in cloud, from the security standpoint, is to be agile, just like it is for any other service you're trying to deliver for cloud. It's the one value proposition that is the root of all. And so, as you said, that agility is all in time to remediate and time to respond. Cloud presents some challenges. There's a lot of data and a lot of signals that the security operator has to contend with, and we're seeing that. There are a lot of great tools that are continuing to be developed in points of integration where Fortinet is taking advantage of, and other ISVs, security ISVs are taking advantage of, in terms of, how can we look at the underlying data and the infrastructure details and metadata, and then turn that into something usable and normalized, so that the security operator can be very effective and really be agile. So that's the current paradigm, I would say.
That's great. And, just really helping give people that unified view. And yeah, and AWS, you guys have a lot of great integrations there where you're helping with your capabilities. Can you talk a little bit about that, Brian?
Yeah, absolutely. So AWS is really, it really provides all the building blocks for customers to do anything they can imagine, right? It can go all the way from being like a Netflix, an HBO type of fully immersive, cloud elastic environment where security scales with everything as things go up or down. Or it can be something really as simple as like a mail server, or an S3 bucket with an EC2 instance sitting on top. And so as things go up or down, we provide all the tools that our customers need in order to secure their environment. But the best part is that all of our tools come with robust integrations and deep API connectivity. So partners just like yourselves can come along, build your own unique value differentiated offering with AWS, and then tie back into those native services. So that customers can really get the benefit and the value of both offerings together as they go to secure their environments.
Yeah, and I think that's something important to talk about, because there's historically been this tension that customers are trying to figure out, do I just go with the first party native cloud service for a particular capability, security in this case, or do I need something that complements that or in addition to it? And there doesn't necessarily have to be this tension. I think when you're looking at security solutions, they should take advantage of all of the opportunity to provide a low level of operation for the security practice, to use the data and the signals to the best degree possible, and normalize all that content and all those findings to make it most useful. Not only useful, but get rid of the noise and simplify the view to what are the real priorities for the security operator, and then allow the security operator to focus on policy and not dealing necessarily with all of the underlying knobs of trying to tune the environment on a continual basis. So the natural, yeah, I was just going to say those two can, both the third party and the first party services can be married up very well together with the right solutions.
Nice. Yeah. And to me, this is very much about building efficiency. And I want to dig into that a little bit more, just the challenges that cybersecurity teams and security teams have in supporting the move to the cloud. So another area when we talk about making sure that security can successfully support scale and growth with the move to the cloud is that security teams need the right tools in place to help their teams be successful and to work efficiently. So looking at some findings from this report on the life and times of cybersecurity professionals, we see that they are challenged by things like an increase in complexity and workloads, cyber threats increasing with increasing attack surface, their teams are understaffed, their budget pressures, they have regulatory compliance that's complex. Is this consistent with what you guys are seeing and what you're trying to build to make sure that these people are enabled? And let's start with Aiden.
100%. So, okay, Brian talked about this earlier. The space is very elastic, and what do you get with elasticity? You typically get a lot of growth as organizations have been moving to the cloud with more speed. There's a lot of sprawl, right? And so, okay, that's the first challenge. How do I see all of this inventory that I have, and how do I classify all of that inventory and those assets in the cloud. So firstly, I need to know what is in my environment and what the purpose of those assets are, right? That gets to be very, very difficult at scale, and you have to find a way to automate that. And so that's a challenge, the visibility challenge, I think, is how I would summarize it. And then those workloads are very ephemeral. So I have an object that comes online, a new application that's deployed, an EC2 instance that's spun up, a new VPC that's created. And how do I account for that within policy without slowing down or removing or diminishing the agility of the application delivery team? And so that's where, we start to look at, okay, what tools do we have available that are, again, aware of the software-defined network, aware of the metadata and what it means in terms of data classification, asset classification, and all of that, and then can make decisions that remove the touch points from the security operator. So they're, again, the fewer touch points we have, the less opportunity for error, and then so forth. We can be, much more efficient. So we go from a problem of having maybe poor visibility initially with a large-scale sprawling environment, but then we create the right workflows, and then from those workflows we create automation. I think we can get to be very, very efficient, and so I would say that's a key focus area that we're seeing from our customers and on AWS.
Aiden, nail on the head, and I'm gonna dive into what you just said and circle back to what you said previously, which is you got to get your security teams working on policies, right? If they're chasing every single rabbit that runs across their screen with an indicator of compromise, indicator of attack, there's a lot of rabbit holes that your SOC analysts are going to go down. Rather, if your security strategy and solution is a cohesive, working together, automated end to end, then you come back to the idea of policy-based security. And that is so important when it comes to container and elastic environments, because one change that you make on one server may not have an impact, but within an elastic environment, that change could be reflected 1,000 times over, 10,000, 100,000 times over as things scale, right? And so it's really important to have a cohesive security strategy that allows you to make changes at the policy level and at the governance level, rather than on, I changed this one firewall ACL and now this bad geolocation is blocked at this one firewall. It's a drop in the ocean, right? So that is how you address, I think, the lack of cybersecurity resources in the market. But the reality is, in security, we really need to keep the mindset of automation, automating all the things that we can. Let the models make the identification of threats and events, and then have automated policy to be able to respond and react to those in threat detection, rather than putting the human at every step along the way, I think is really key.
I was going to say too, like with AWS is really an enabler in helping development scale and work more quickly. But for security, they really need that automation. Otherwise, it's a lot of tedious manual tasks, right?
Yeah, well, the word scale comes up all the time, and we wear that term out. The scale that's most important is, I think, scaling human assets, and finding or removing mundane tasks or things like infrastructure management deployment. Right, we can deploy with infrastructure as code, but somebody has to maintain those templates and those CloudFormation solutions. But I think what the opportunity is if I want to get to scale my human assets in the best way, have them focus on policy, have them focus on actually remediating critical vulnerabilities, then even moving this to the SaaS route is probably, or I've definitely seen it, is the more preferred path now, right? So I can offload in terms of shared responsibility and being truly cloud native. That becomes a major benefit as well. And I'm pretty certain that you are seeing the same thing, Brian, on the AWS side.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and shameless plug for native AWS services. I think I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't say, hey, guard duty is pretty cool. You should try it out. But in the shared responsibility model, things like guard duty, some of those identification of security events within your AWS environment. not only provide the security telemetry of the cloud, it's also in the cloud. Like, so some of those lower control plane events and things that customers wouldn't otherwise get access to, some of the native AWS services are able to deliver that. And then again, it comes back to third-party offerings that provide those integrations to grab that data and then make the absolute most of that. So that's where what we call our better together stories come along.
Yeah. And so I'll just add on to that, we can take guard duty findings and we can incorporate them through automation directly into policy. So that's integrated into our FortiGate next generation firewall. So when a guard duty sees a malicious IP as an example, we can automatically block that. Nobody has to make any changes on the network infrastructure security side. So it's really, really nice, smooth integration there.
Nice. So yeah, you're pulling the data and you're giving them that control and visibility that they need so they can make sure that they can scale. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the challenges we see too today. We're talking about that speed and control. Like, you want to mitigate risk, but you also want to be able to react quickly. And some of the big challenges we see is that there's really this increase in the threat landscape. So organizations are facing a lot of incidents today. So we have an increase in the threat landscape with organizations facing these incidents. And we see that 27% of organizations have had malware moving laterally to cloud workloads. 25% face targeted penetration attacks. We see many fall victim to 0 days, taking advantage of new or previously unknown vulnerabilities. 22% had attacks from unauthorized access from third parties. 16% had ransomware attacks. So they're really on the front lines dealing with these different types of attacks. And you can see only 12% didn't experience an attack. And we have some other studies that also show even smaller percentages saying that they didn't have incidents. So this is what we see with security challenges when they have an increasing number of applications that are public facing, because it's just so easy to deploy them on these public cloud services. So they're facing challenges like the increase in the threat landscape, increasing usage of cloud services. The agile development processes mean that more products are released, and it can be difficult to make changes for who's responsible for different security aspects of the web applications and APIs. There's sometimes too many tools or some ineffective tools. Aiden, is this kind of what you're seeing when you talk to customers, of just like a lot of different tools in place and they're kind of in different areas with different users?
Yes. I think the tool sprawl is a big challenge. The more tools you add, you typically then have to have a layer of tool integration on top of that. So customers will typically lean on a pretty broad ecosystem of solutions for security specifically. I've talked to a specific customer who had more than 200 tools. I said, well, who are you using for security and cloud? Well, this was specific to the AWS actually. And they said, we have all of them. And you have business units that may invest in certain tools, but not get the most value out of them. And so the challenge there is, I think even before the tools, you have to understand what your organizational requirements and goals are, and then understand what your workflows. I always talk about workflow in cloud because the tool should match the particular workflow you're trying to support, whether it's delivering an application and securing that application, both pre-runtime, post-runtime, and then network infrastructure. Do you have essentially, are you following best practices? There's not always one single architecture that applies, but maybe a series of architectures that apply. And so, once you understand what those requirements are, then you can start to narrow down your tools. And then for the tools that you do select, are you working with partners that can support your broader ecosystem? So do my partners partner with my partners? And, whether that's partnering with AWS effectively, that's probably the most important in this case, or being able to integrate data from other third-party solutions as well. That's going to be very important. I mean, this the 12% you mentioned stood out to me. It says 12% haven't experienced an attack in the last 12 months. I wonder if that's maybe a visibility challenge, maybe unsuccessful attacks, but some percentage of that 12 probably have been attacked and may not be even aware of it.
Yep. And Brian, you're seeing everything at AWS. You see all the threats, and you guys have all of these ways that you're monitoring to make sure your customers are successful and can be protected. What are you guys seeing, and how are you guys helping your customers?
Yeah, no, I mean, great question. And Aiden hit it on the head again. I mean, just kind of like bringing in from your last slide, malware is going to continue to grow and get smarter. We've seen over the last like couple years that it's not just ransomware drops in a payload, detonates, and you've got a lost host. It sits, it dwells, it propagates, it lateral propagation and north, south, east, west. It's trying to gain access to other credentials. It's calling home, and then it's moving and doing more, and it's going to continue to do that. And so, I think if you don't have the right compensating controls in the right places, you're gonna be in for a bad time, because it's coming. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. We always say that in security. But when it comes, is it going to detonate across your entire environment because you didn't have the right wall set up? Or is it going to hit like a dev server or Linda's PC? Sorry, Linda, if you're out there, it wasn't personal. What is it going to get? And so I think that that's really important to consider.
I would, if I could jump in and add to that, right? So I think what we're starting to get into is some of the concept of best practices, right? So segmentation, you mentioned, Ryan, that's huge. Like, I have to limit my blast radius. The other thing, when we talk about visibility is not just seeing the objects and assets in your cloud environment, but it's the ability to see deep into the data that's streaming across your cloud enclaves. Through your ingress and egress points, being able to do deep packet inspection and being able to unpackage SSL encrypted content. That's going to be important to identify things like ransomware before it even gets to your endpoints, right? So that type of visibility is, I think, very, very key too.
Yeah, and control, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I was just going to say, and the last thing that Aiden, that you touched on is the products that you purchase have to compile into a solution, right? And when you make that decision, I think you really need to make sure that you're considering time to value, because if you've got the world's best product, nobody's ever heard of it, it's a Gen AI solution that replaces all your humans and like fixes all your things. That's great. But it might require like 10 years of development to get it to work with your other solutions. You really need to keep that in mind when you're picking what products to put where so that you're focusing more on the solution and the outcome. And that's where we get into like kind of these platform type of engagements, making sure when you pick a vendor that has a platform that can provide more than just one piece of your security architecture, I think you're really following best practices to make sure that you're really easing any future pain that you may not know you're going to have when you identify an organization like yours with a platform that integrates really well with the native services. I think you can't go wrong there.
Absolutely. And Brian, it's funny you mentioned that too, because we do these validation studies too to test different vendor solutions. And that's something we see that sometimes people don't factor in those time and work considerations of how impactful that can be to staff, especially when you have, like we mentioned, people are short staffed, and those types of time savings and workload issues are a really big consideration to make. We can talk a little bit about risk management now. We were talking about, the importance of efficiency. And this is kind of fun to look at when we see, who's these organizations that say they have these robust tools in place, they're still facing a lot of issues and incidents. And these incidents always drive what their actions are. So, the organizations are responsible for protecting the applications and workloads. Think about an organization that all of a sudden is a lot more nimble and agile at delivering these great applications and building complex applications that are connected to other partners, applications with APIs, and these applications can do better things, but that comes with a lot of risk. You want to make sure you can protect your own data, protect your customers' data, and just make sure that you can, thoroughly have a strategy that can support this growth and scale and have your security teams enable and be enablers instead of having challenges. So when we look at these cybersecurity incidents experienced in the past 12 months on cloud native applications and infrastructure, they have lots of security tools in place, but they're facing, these big issues. They have coverage of different security tools where they can get alerts, but what really matters is whether they can prioritize the actions that they need to remediate these issues in time to prevent incidents. So despite having tools in place, they face a wide range of incidents, and this is really scary and daunting. So Aiden, this is another area where Fortinet helps because you're making things more efficient so they can just mitigate the risk based on priorities. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I mean, risk management is very complex. There's risk management and risk remediation, I guess you could say. So if I'm looking at this chart here, I think so. As Brian said earlier, risk is based on the amount of time that a threat is resident in my environment. So I need to remove that as quickly as possible. And that's the challenge of again, like just the volume of signal that the security operator has to deal with. The best way to mitigate risk is to effectively identify, and that goes back to best practices even before we get into the things and the tools that AWS and Fortinet can provide. If I have a standard process for data and asset classification, that's a good starting point. And then I can start to say, okay, well, this is a particularly interesting workload. I know it has a higher priority than maybe some other workloads. And by the way, this workload that has maybe ERP system on it or PII data, personal identifiable information about my employees as an example, but so it also has a blast radius that touches these other critical systems, right? So once you identify that, you understand the criticality of an asset. We can do that through the systems and automation that are available in cloud, and then present that to the security operator so they're not spending 59 minutes out of the hour just trying to figure out what a signal means. And I think that's the huge opportunity, right?
Yeah, and I'll add to that. As much as it pains me to say, cybersecurity is still a cost center, right? It's not necessarily a revenue generating department within the organization. There are things you can do to justify your existence, right? Like tying security to customer requirements and compliance and things like that, which are completely valid. And if you're not doing that, please do that. But, at the end of the day, I think in 2023, we all learned that we had to do more with less. And I think that really came back to the automation and the tool set of customers. And so we saw more customers reevaluating their cybersecurity tool stack than ever, right? And they started to realize some of the tools that they could live without in the consolidation of their tool set to make sure that they had fully integrated solutions. They were getting the sausage at the end of the day when it came to their half analogy representation of an answer. But the other thing that I wanted to point out that we're seeing within AWS is, to Aiden's point, is DSPM, Data Security Posture Management. It is a new use case that we have officially released within the security competency at AWS. So identifying ISV providers that have software offerings around data identification. So what data do I have within my environment? Like Aiden just said, automated classification of that data. Is this a social security number, or is this just a random string of data, right? And being able to understand the two. And then what security controls do I have around that PII, personally identifiable information, or PHI, personal health information, or PCI, payment card information, all those sensitive data types. What security controls do you have in place? And then do the security controls match the compliance and regulations that you are you are required to follow? Especially if you're in a highly compliant location like Europe with GDPR, or all of the data privacy regulation that we're seeing in Asia and APJ, and how that's moving to the United States. Like if you don't know what data you have where and what security controls you have around it, you really need to get a hold of that really quickly because if it hasn't hit you yet, it is coming, and you got to be ready for it. So yeah, security compliance, it all comes together.
Yeah, and that context really helps you know where you need your protections in place.
Can we touch on, before we move on, this 42% who view securing web apps and APIs to be important? The other 58% probably need to reevaluate that as a priority. I mean, the number one use case for data services in cloud is for web services, and most of that's API. I mean, every one of us who have a mobile phone, that's all those interactions are API originated, right? And so, I think the less attention is given to the most important use case in cloud. It's the most important use case because this is, as even small, medium businesses move to a digital footprint, it's all about the user experience and the how you connect with users in digital channels. And so there are more APIs being published than ever before. They're publicly facing. The cloud networks, if not managed in the correct way, can be very open with lots of ingress and egress points. So there has to be an overall strategy about how APIs are deployed, and then also protecting specifically APIs. And there are a lot of strong tools. We have a massively effective solution there for that at Fortinet to both discover APIs and shadow APIs, build the schema for those APIs, and then understand and build, really an auto-tuning system for how users are able to access those APIs. But I don't want to let that one go specifically because it should be higher on the list than what this survey gives it credit for.
Yeah, and we do have a separate API security study that really dug into a lot of these issues, and that those issues of visibility. It's a great using APIs is a great thing in developers' toolkits, again, for building more complex applications. But again, the more complex they are, the more connections they have, and some of the top challenges, things like authorization and authentication between the connections. Those are really serious issues, or just how often they're updated. Again, a lot of people don't have their arms around that. So they really need that visibility and control to protect their applications. And again, this is super important to enable business growth, because if you want to build more complicated applications and be able to put those applications out there to better serve your customers, you better make sure that it's secure and you don't risk exposing your customers' data or your own sensitive data as these different connections are made for powerful applications.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one last thing, and Aiden, you're going through my typical talk track here, man. I think you're looking off my notes, but yeah, exactly. One last one is how much of your security data is going through an API, right? We just talked about the integrations that Fortinet has with native AWS services. What about the rest of your security interwebs, as your security telemetry is flying through these tunnels on the internet? Like, how secure are those? And do you have visibility to what APIs exist out there that your data is going through? Something else to consider as well.
Yeah. And I want to dig into the integration aspects too, because AWS has a lot of great built-in features. And then, you're using Fortinet capabilities to just augment that. Can you guys each talk a little bit about the features of AWS and then where Fortinet can augment that? And I think maybe we can start with Brian to talk about AWS.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really starts with the shared responsibility model, right? I get $5 every time I say that word. It goes straight into my account from AWS. I'm just kidding. That's not a thing. But the AWS really is serious about the shared responsibility model, the security of the cloud and then the security in the cloud. And of the cloud, AWS is going to manage everything under what we call the control plane, right? So everything underneath the physical infrastructure, the physical access to the physical infrastructure, what goes on underneath all of the hypervisors and everything else that happens underneath, AWS will continue to maintain and take care of that for all of our customers. Security in the cloud really comes back to the responsibility of the customers themselves to secure what they build. And that is where AWS our mindset is to leverage the collaborative intelligence of the entire cybersecurity community and not to think that we have all the answers ourselves. So we're not going to grab everything, build everything, and do everything ourselves. Instead, we're going to rely on partners just like you guys to make sure that our customers have the most secure experience. And what we're most interested in is getting those workloads into AWS. In order to do that, it has to be secure from the start. And so we build services to help accelerate that partner motion, just like Security Hub, right? It's our security orchestration automated response platform where we kind of pull in a lot of the security telemetry and give the customers visibility to what's happening within their cloud environment, within their AWS estate. And there are so many connectivity options into Security Hub where offerings just like your FortiGate's offering plugs right into that in order to give customer full visibility of what's happening with their security estate.
Yeah, and I'll jump in there. The concept of the shared responsibility model extends even to solutions that we offer. When you look at having a SaaS delivered firewall service like the FortiGate Cloud Native Firewall or FortiGate CNF, that provides the opportunity to lower the level of effort on your security operations team and your network delivery team by really just consuming the firewall as a service. You don't have to worry about things like plumbing the security infrastructure into your own AWS accounts. You can service multiple accounts across your organization with a single security filtering solution in the region, right? Potentially. So really lowers the level of effort, reduces the complexity on the AWS architecture overall, and it really extends that whole concept of shared responsibility. And as was mentioned by Brian, it's integrated into AWS native services. So we can stream logs to your AWS service account in S3 or provide integrations with Security Hub and other services. And then we can automate policy so that you can define the policy framework, right? So think of this idea where I describe the intent of a policy that, if a workload or data looks like some particular definition, and it matches that policy, then great. That policy would automatically apply to whatever workload or application ends up appearing in that environment. And if it doesn't match, if metadata tagging is not correct, as an example, then we could potentially block that. But you're not spending cycles managing the moves, adds, and changes in a cloud environment, and that buys a ton of mileage for your security staff. But again, built on all those concepts. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So you guys have a great case study. Can you share a little bit? Because I'd love to hear some best practices that you can share with the audience for what can work well.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a joint customer who has deployed the FortiGate Cloud Native Firewall on AWS. This particular customer is an agricultural insurance services company, a very large organization located in the U.S. They needed to migrate to AWS, and they had a requirement for additional next generation firewalling features, but they didn't want to manage or maintain the resources in their own enclave. And so that was really the drive toward the FortiGate Cloud Native Firewall. They thought that the existing solutions that they had really didn't address all of their needs in terms of deep packet inspection, but they also needed a solution that was integrated with AWS. And so this is where the FortiGate CNF solution came in. We applied unified threat management features that integrated with the AWS cloud environment. We were able to do exactly what I talked about earlier, which was automate the policy frameworks for the customer to make it very, very low effort in terms of the day-to-day management of their service, of their security. So as Brian mentioned, what was so critical was the faster time to deploy, where they were able to launch it very quickly. They got the advanced network protection that they needed specific to their use case. They got coverage for ingress and egress and east-west traffic. And it integrated very deeply into their AWS cloud environment. And finally, what was pretty important was they also had our firewalls in other locations, the FortiGate firewall. We were able to provide them a single pane of management that managed both the SaaS service and the physical appliances. So that was a very big value proposition for the customer to simplify management, not just in AWS, but also bring in the premise-based management as well.
Great. We have a couple of questions to get to, but I did want to just give you guys some quick chances to talk about, since you've seen so much, what are best practices you can share or any mistakes to avoid, from all the things that you guys have seen. So Brian, let's start with you.
Yeah. One of the first things I would point out that we see is when you move to the cloud from like an on-prem environment, typically you have one of two options: lift and shift. You just grab your old stuff and you put it in, not really utilizing the value of the cloud with elastic environments, or you modernize, right? You migrate, you modernize your applications and your workloads so that they take full advantage of the cloud. You only use what you pay for, so on and so forth. One of the things that we often see as kind of pitfalls in the migration path is not really modernizing their security along with modernizing their applications. And we talked a lot about how you can modernize your security for modern applications, things like shifting left into CI/CD and making sure that you have the virtual security components like firewalls that are centrally managed. So you're managing policies across your entire estate and not just single individual points. And then just making sure that your vulnerabilities and observability into these elastic environments is consistent with what you're building, right? As things go up and come down, you want to make sure that if you do have a vulnerability, you don't just fix it once in the thing that just scaled 10,000 times, that you fix the root cause of the problem, and that you're fully utilizing those container-like environments. So I think that that's one of the biggest things that we see, making sure you're ready for modern security with modern workloads.
Aiden, anything to add before we dive into questions?
Yeah, there's so many best practices to be thinking of. On the premise and in the data center, you have choke points where you have these monolithic security appliances that maybe handle all of the ingress or egress traffic out of that facility. In cloud, you have the flexibility of being very prescriptive to your use case. So understand what your use cases are, and then implement security as a feature. That's what cloud allows you to do. You don't have to think of it as I'm buying an appliance, I'm sticking an appliance here, and this is the static architecture. It's maybe an application or some a particular flow of traffic has scale out requirements, and so maybe some sort of auto scaling or manual scaling is important there. But maybe you have a service that has very specific and high level encryption requirements, and maybe that's a scale up design, right? And so now we can break out the security functions to the specific use cases and deploy those across the architecture and come up with a much better solution for a variety of applications. The segmentation is very important. And I think even before the tools, right, do an assessment of what your capabilities are as an organization, what your skill sets are and the skill set gaps you have. That'll inform, how you lean on, and I would recommend leaning on your partner ecosystem and look for your partners to partner with each other. I can't tell you how important that is. In this specific instance, it's going to be AWS and Fortinet, right? We partner very well. Our services and systems work very complementary. That's going to get you a lot of mileage. It's going to allow you to accelerate that migration. And I would leave you with that. I could keep going on and on, but for the sake of time.
Great. Yeah. Be strategic. Make sure, again, cloud native is all about efficiency. If you can utilize these integrations, that builds efficiency for the security team to keep up with scale. So I'm going to take a couple of questions. And so for the first one that came in, so are there performance impacts or latency related to the Fortinet solution, FortiGate's CNF solution? And of course, I'll let Aiden take that one.
Yeah. So, all right. So a little bit about the design of the FortiGate CNF solution. So again, it's a SaaS solution. You don't deploy any of the solution into your own AWS enclave. That's deployed in a Fortinet managed environment. So we manage all of the inspection clusters. You have a SaaS portal where you manage policy, but it's in the same availability zone, uh, in the same region as your services. So it's very much in line. And so we're building efficiencies there. So in terms of latency, very minimal impact, typical impact as you would see with any other firewall solution, doing any sort of inspection. And then for the performance, it's a scale out solution. So we will scale to the bandwidth that you require as much as you need. So no performance limitations in that regard. Yeah, that's a pretty standard question.
Great. And another kind of related question, I think here, what modifications would I need to make to my security architecture to add FortiGate CNF?
Yeah, that's the nice thing about it. It actually is using Gateway Load Balancer on the back end. So we talk again about those AWS integrations. So you don't have to worry about any IP address renumbering. You don't have to change anything in your environment to adapt this as a security solution for you. So very, very simple, right? Easy insertion is how I describe it.
Great. And one last related question that I think we can do quickly since we're running over time here. How is it deployed relative to my AWS account?
So let's just talk about how you subscribe to it. So from the AWS marketplace, you subscribe to it as a service. Once registered, you select your regions. The deployment cluster is deployed essentially in front of your enclave within the Fortinet managed environment. So yeah, it's very localized to the applications and the VPCs that you happen to be protecting. But nothing in that regard is deployed within the customer environment.
Great. So easy to get started and look for it and connect. And Brian and Aiden, thank you so much for joining me today. We went a little over time. There were some great questions coming in. So for those whose questions we did not get to, we will follow up with you. Feel free to follow us and connect with us if you have any other questions. And thanks for joining and for your time today.
Yeah, thank you both.
All right. Thank you guys so much.
All right. Yeah, take care.
Right.
Bye now.
Bye.
Oh, well, I agree and have to echo that. Thank you all around. And certainly there were a lot of questions that came in today, so we did not get to all of them, but we will make sure that all of those questions asked get sent on to the team. So you will get some answers back from Fortinet, from ESG, from AWS. So keep those questions coming in. If you still have a few burning questions that you were holding on to, now's the time. Get those in. Well, a big thank you to Melinda, to Brian, to Aiden for such an interesting chat, taking us through all of this information in a really engaging way. For me, I love these sorts of fireside conversations because we get to hear what the speakers are passionate about. We get to kind of go where they're interested in exploring and what they want to dig into. And I find that really fascinating. And I think, the topic that we were getting into today as we just started at the top here is one that is constantly moving, constantly growing, and constantly changing. So really kind of coming along with these expert presenters and leading thought innovators in this space is really important and really exciting, because there's just no pause button on any of this, right? It's not stopping. It's not holding still. So we all have to keep up right along with it. Speaking of which, if you are looking for some ways to get a little bit more information, follow up on this chat that we just had here, the first thing I want to remind you to do is go to that handouts tab and get that ESG ebook. Looking to modernize network security on public clouds? Consider a cloud native managed firewall service. This is a fantastic follow-up, a really interesting read. It's fun, it's well laid out. So this is definitely something that you want to have. Hold on to, save that, download that, and come back to it after we wrap. Don't go anywhere just yet, because there is still a prize giveaway. We have a $250 Amazon gift card that we will be giving away to someone here live, present, and lucky with us at the webinar. And that somebody is Anthony DeZono from Illinois. Anthony DeZono from Illinois. I hope that you are staying cozy and warm in Illinois today, Anthony. Now you have $250 you can put towards some warm slippers or warm mittens or something cozy. All right, well, congratulations. And Anthony, we will follow up with you after we wrap. Well, with that, my friends, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to, of course, thank Fortinet, AWS, and ESG for making this webinar possible, especially to our incredible speakers, to Melinda, Aiden, and Brian, for taking us along on such an interesting and in-depth conversation. Lots to think about today. Which of course brings me to all of you. My biggest high fives, my biggest thank yous, they always go to all of you, because I know how busy your days are. I know how much you have going on, especially if you are involved in the security space, especially if this is your focus, and coming up with these moments to stop, to consider, to strategize, to research. I know that that doesn't always seem like there's space in our day, but this is what we're talking about today, right? We're talking about evolution. We're talking about growth. We're talking about staying apace with that constantly growing, that universe style growth, and creating that space and then filling it. So today we got to create some space in our days and then fill it with all kinds of information. And I hope that you are walking away feeling absolutely buzzy and lit up by all of that cool insight. I know I've learned a ton, and I really appreciate all of you being here with me and being a part of that. I hope that I get to see all of you on a webinar again soon. And until then, have an absolutely beautiful end to your day.